Okay, good morning, everybody. I'll go ahead and call to order the License and Variance Board meeting for Wednesday, August 26, 2015. First item on the agenda is 2A, public hearing for privileged license request LIC 2015-16 beer wine package for 3240 South Cobb Drive, the Kroger Company, DBA Kroger Store number 699, with Daniel W. Portier as agent. Is the applicant present? Could you please step forward to the podium? I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
It's good.
But for the record, and if you could speak into the microphone, for the record, could you please tell us who you are?
Daniel W. Portier. I'm the unit manager at the Kroger at 3240 South Cobb Drive, Smyrna, Georgia.
Okay, and your privileged license request is to have you as the registered agent for the Kroger. Is
yes,
that correct?
Sir.
Okay. Go ahead. For the record, a background investigation has been conducted by the Smyrna Police Department, and that failed to reveal any information that would preclude the issuance of this license for Mr. Porter. So how long have you been with the Kroger Company?
36 years.
Okay. Congratulations. That's a long time. I thought I'd been around for a while. So are you new to this store? Or
I'm coming up on my 3rd-year anniversary, but I actually grew up in the area, went to Osborne High School, lived in the area, lived in Marietta all my life.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Have you ever been the registered agent for a store, or is this the first one?
This is, I believe, is the first one. They used to put it in the operations manager for the district's name, but I think they've since went to the unit manager.
Okay. And I know that the store itself, of course, since it's been open, has had a registered agent, and you guys have been able to sell beer and wine, Yes, sir. And to my knowledge, we haven't had any issues. But can you just talk to us a little bit about some of the things that are implemented there at the store to help ensure the appropriate sale of alcohol?
Yes, sir. Whenever we hire any associate, we of course, do the pre-screening, do a background check, drug screen. If they pass that, then we send them on to our training center. In our training center, they do the alcohol training, have them sign off various documents, go through that process, and then when they come back to the store, we re-emphasize those documents and have them recite them. And then at my particular store, I even pull that alcohol and tobacco sheet out and cover it with them individually, so they're basically getting that information at least 3 times. Every cashier is required to get an alcohol permit, and we have that on file at the store. We don't let them tote it around just for the mere fact they might lose it, so we keep it on premise. All managers have alcohol permit, and we are set up that anyone that has a vertical ID, only a manager can enter that data for a cashier. And we do not let any cashier under the age of 18 run a register.
Okay. And what is your official role there at the store?
I'm the unit manager.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
So how often are you at the store?
I'm there 6 days a week.
Your hours are typically?
I usually start my day around 6 in the morning till 6 or 7 at night. But we have someone, a unit manager on staff from at least 7 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. If there's not a unit manager there at 11 and they have a vertical ID, then we do not sell alcohol to that individual.
All right.
Any other questions? This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak to issue 2A, I ask that you step forward now. Let the record show that there is none. If there's no further comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve privilege license request LIC 2015-16 beer wine package 3240 South Cobb Drive. The Kroger Company doing business as Kroger Store number 699 with Daniel Porter as agent.
Second.
We have a motion to approve item 2A, and it's properly seconded. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call for the vote. Okay, that passes unanimously 3-0. Thank you
very much.
Mm-hmm. Next item on the agenda is 2B, public hearing for variance request V15-036 to allow the reduction of a front setback from 35 feet to 22.5 feet and a side setback from 10 to 9 feet for a 0.42 acre tract land lot 556 located at 3351 Lee Street. Parton Property Solutions is the applicant. Is the applicant present? If you could please step forward. For the record, state your name.
Good morning. I'm Mark Hall.
Good morning, Mark.
Morning.
So now, also just for the record, we've got two separate agenda items for this same property. So I know that through the course of discussion that one could affect the other. But for the sake of agendas and for legality, we've separated the two setbacks. And have discussion for the variance request for the undisturbed stream buffer and the impervious buffer as a second variance. So it's perfectly fine to mix the conversation between the two, but let's try to keep this focused on the need for the request for the reduction of the front and the side setback.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
So could you just go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your variance request and the property and what you hope to do?
Yes, sir. Overall, we're just trying to improve the overall property itself by taking an older house and remodeling that to make it nice for a little bit bigger house for a family that may want to move into the Smyrna area. I'm personally a Smyrna resident myself, live in Vinings Estates, so working in the local area is important to us. With the design that we're proposing, we're looking at adding a two-car garage onto the side of the house that is immediately accessible from the road. There we go. That's immediately accessible from the street. The current driveway actually goes all the way around the side and back, and it's only accessible to one car. So with trying to meet with current standards, most folks are two vehicle in households. We're just trying to facilitate that moving forward. So there is, because of the way that the house is situated currently on the property, we're leaving the existing structure and just kind of expanding that sideways, which puts us about 1 foot into the side setback, and then moving that garage, just putting it in, and it'll actually come out a little bit forward, which puts us 22.5 feet from the street. So.
Okay. All right. So did you talk about so the addition or the request for the addition of the garage?
Yes, sir.
Which would spur the need for the side setback, right?
Yes, sir.
So what about the front setback?
It's the same. The garage is actually for the side and the same. And from traversing around the neighborhood, it's very consistent with other houses in the neighborhood in terms of the size of the setback, the design of the new proposed property.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant so far? We're going to get staff up to kind of give the staff perspective of this variance request in just a minute, but
okay.
Questions right now for the applicant. Okay, if you would just have a seat for just a second,
okay.
Perhaps stay up front. We might call you back up. At this time, I'll call up Joey Stobbs from Community Development.
Joey Stobbs, Planner 2 with Community Development, and Bob Thorne is a planner with Community Development that's working on these items, but due to the complexity, I'm just going to give an overview of this one. Subject property has a single family brick ranch home that the applicant is proposing to make some renovations to. That entails an attached garage to the south side of the property and a front porch across the front of the home. So those two proposed additions, they necessitate a variance in the side setback from 10 feet to 9 feet, and then a front setback reduction from 35 feet to 22.5 feet.
Okay.
They're sort of intertwined with the second variance. So, one supports the other. And I'm fine if you just want to leave these separate.
No. I think that's a relevant point, and that's what I didn't do a good job at explaining is that while we do have these separated, one is kind of dependent on the others. So go ahead, and if you want to give staff perspective as it relates to the other as well.
Yeah, the existing property is a brick ranch home. It has a driveway on the north side of the property that extends along the side all the way to the back and loops around for a rear entry garage. That whole driveway in the rear section is within the state 25-foot undisturbed buffer.
And it's been there for years, I'm assuming?
Yes, for as long as we know. Prior to the buffer ordinances being adopted by the state and the city.
Mm-hmm.
This stream was not even determined to be a stream when those ordinances were adopted. I don't think this is a seasonal tributary to Nickajack Creek. It doesn't even show up on our but the stream maps. So, city engineer has determined that it is a water of significance. Therefore, these buffers are applied.
Okay.
So there is a driveway that extends through that undisturbed buffer, and we have through conversations with our department and the city engineer have developed this plan with the applicant to consolidate the proposed modifications to the home and on to the front and the side where they're least impactful to the stream. We feel that's a better negotiation because the existing conditions are actually more impactful to the stream than the proposed plan that's been developed. Because currently there's 23% of the property that's impervious, and the proposed reduces that to about 17% total impervious area. It's like 26% reduction in impervious surface, and it's 17% outside of the state 25-foot buffer. So, yes, it is still in the city buffer and it is still in the city impervious buffer, but those ordinances were adopted after this home was developed. It was originally built
which is
in
the
the
case
50s.
for a considerable portion of the homes in
Correct.
Smyrna. So just to make sure that I understand this.
Sure.
The current driveway that services this house, it's either asphalt or concrete, some type of impervious surface, right?
Correct.
And it currently comes around the north side of the property and loops around the back.
Correct.
And in that entrance of this driveway into the backyard, it enters into this stream, whether we call it a seasonal stream. Obviously, if there's a driveway in it, it doesn't have water in it all the time, but the actual driveway goes into this seasonal stream.
Yeah,
into the buffer. Okay, so the tie-in between the two is that the request in the application is to remove completely this impervious surface that currently exists that goes into the buffer, right? And to add this two-car garage, so it'll be a front load, a front entry with respect to parking, as opposed to driving around the rear and having the current driveway go through the stream buffer. Is that correct?
That's correct. They will remove the existing driveway that's in the state buffer. They will restore that area with as it should be, with vegetation and water quality devices that will be approved by the city engineer.
All of the state and local requirements, as they relate to stream buffers.
Right. I mean, so there's a more detailed plan than we have that the city engineer will review to look at the water quality, techniques that they'll use, which are beyond my ability
and
to
is
speak
it
to.
true that within this proposed stream buffer improvement, there are state EPA regulations or some type of state EPA involvement, some permissive
Yes.
rights that will fall on the state and not the city. Is that right?
Correct. The applicant will need to obtain a permit from EPD to restore the buffer, because even if it's a restoration activity, it's in the buffer and it requires state approval. But that's a separate issue. They're separate, but they're all kind of connected. It will result in, if approved, as we recommend, that the buffer will be restored. There will be less impervious surface on the parcel in total, and there will be water quality measures for the impervious area that's there or proposed for when it does enter into that seasonal tributary. So
Okay.
the existing condition right now is it's 23% impervious with no water quality, with no restoration in the buffer.
In the stream buffer.
And it could be allowed to remain there in perpetuity.
Right.
So, and if we were to strictly apply the ordinances in this property and many other properties in that area, they would not be able to be developed. So
Okay.
we've it's undergone extensive review by us and the city engineer. We recommended approval, and there's still approval that the city engineer will have to make for the land disturbance permit. They'll have to explain exactly how they're going to do this conceptual plan that we have now. But we recommended approval with the two conditions: that the requested variance be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan submitted with the variance application. 2, city engineer shall approve final design of any water quality best management practice measures prior to issuance of a building permit. And there should probably be a third condition that the buffer is restored and will be verified before final inspection of the property.
Yeah, and all that could be, in theory, could be tied to the issuance of the building permit and the subsequent to finish with the final inspection.
Correct.
Without, approval without that. All right. Do we have any questions for the staff?
Does the current house violate any building setbacks now?
Yeah, the front is non-conforming because it is about 30. What was it? It's about 32, I think, feet from the 31 feet from the front setback. It's 31 feet from the front property line. Should be 35 feet.
Okay.
It's also in the state buffer, city buffer, impervious buffer.
Talking about
Yeah.
setbacks. Okay, so front setback's already a violation.
Right, as a non-conforming,
Okay.
legal non-conforming condition.
All right.
And just for the record, really, and for clarification, there's a significant portion of single-family residential that was built years ago and are considered by current standards to be non-conforming. It's not just on Lee Street. It's all over, and that's a common thing throughout the country, really. As regulations and ordinances change throughout the years, they affect pre-existing structures, in a certain way. This is certainly not uncommon in the slightest bit. As a matter of fact, the proposed site plan that I'm looking at, when you apply the current standards of the day with regard to the 75-foot buffer, the whole house is within the 75-foot buffer. So But again, would it be accurate? I know that there's standards that you guys measure variance requested. The standards have to be met and all kind of things. But ultimately, staff and community development's recommending approval. And if I heard you right, again, I just want to make sure that I understand this. It's primarily because not only the standards you measured against, but also that really you're taking a driveway out of, as requested. It would be to remove a driveway that currently exists in a stream buffer and do away with that. So I don't want to, I'm trying to recall what you said, but basically it's going to improve things as it relates to stormwater management, and therefore staff recommends approval. Is that right?
That's correct. The driveway was originally proposed to remain, but through these iterations between us and city engineer, it's been taken out, and the applicants responded to all of our recommendations to make this a better proposal. So yes, we've recommended approval on that.
Okay. Any other questions for staff right now? Yeah.
Yeah, not now.
Okay. This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak either for or against, I ask that you please step forward at this time. If we have multiple, we'll just kind of take turns. If you would come up and please, if you would, for the record, just state your name, and I ask that anybody that wants to come up and provide comment just speak into the microphone. That's how we're actually capturing the minutes of the meeting.
My name is June Wolfe Jordan. Am I speaking too loud?
No, it's fine.
I live at 3366 Pretty Branch with my husband, Joe. I'd like to start out by saying we never received a letter. It was through the sign and through discussion with neighbors, and I called the city, and Joey emailed us all the information.
A little bit, yeah, there you go.
Okay, and Joey emailed us the information. So perhaps in the future, perhaps a signed return receipt would be helpful.
Are you contiguous to the property?
Yes, directly our backyards meet.
Okay.
And Melinda and Stephen, who live just north of them, she and I discussed it. They did not receive it either, but
They're
are
contiguous
aware.
too?
Excuse me?
They're also contiguous?
Yes, sir, on the north border. I'm mentioning this because we all know the volume of mail. It's quite possible for people not to receive a notice, but of course we saw the sign and inquired. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm here, my husband and I are not opposed to development, but we are very much opposed to this development because of the things that have been discussed, the setback. We are having a problem now with precedent, and we're hearing that a lot from our mayor and our city council. Because things are approved, it sets the pathway for future development, and there's always a precedent that they can refer to. Again, we're excited for this property to be developed. The backyard is terribly neglected. We've had problems with the trees falling into our yard, a 30-foot piece of tree. And we have sent letters to the current owner as well as the previous owner, and we hope, and I'm sure we will get some type of response from them. We are opposed to going down to 22 feet. I'm sure it's quite possible to put a lovely home on this property and not ask for a change in the zoning. These zones protect the homeowners. They preserve the neighborhood we live in. And as many of you probably know, Forest Hills is a wonderful neighborhood to live in. And we all care very much about our property. We're respectful of our neighbors, and we try and maintain our property as well. But we are growing, and we're very popular. We have a lot of older homes. I'm sure young families moving in are going to need more than a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We all anticipate this growth and development. But I urge you, please, to ask this developer to come back with a nice plan that doesn't require that you break the rules and change them. Those of us who bought in were aware of the ordinances, and we chose to respect them and to live with them. If this property is developed in another way, I'm quite sure they'll have no trouble selling it, so I don't think there'll be a financial problem for them. And I guess that's basically it. Do you have any questions regarding what I've said?
No, I just, I'll let them answer, but for me, I don't really have any questions, and I appreciate you. It was Mrs. Jordan, is that
Yes,
right?
sir. Appreciate
you coming up and giving us that perspective. And to be, perfectly honest, I can definitely understand what you're saying, but it is a reality that even if the proposal were to involve hypothetically, okay, I'm going to tear the old house down, or I'm going to turn it from a 2-1 into a 4-3, and do all this, because of the current setbacks that affect this home and many, many homes that are currently non-conforming. Realistically, probably any type of plan that involves making the actual house bigger, whether that's adding a garage or tearing it down and building a new one or adding to what's there to add bedrooms, is going to require some type of a side, front, or rear setback. But because of the setbacks and the actual dimensions of the property and where the stream buffer right now is right in the center of the property. Mm-hmm. And it is true that that the city for years has done side setback and front setback. Almost every license and variance board meeting that we have involves some type of a setback request because of the application of. Don't worry about the beep. Because of the application of. These people, anybody, whether they own the house and live there or whether it's an investment property, then they want to improve the property in some way. They want to, modernize the house, and it almost every time in these situations involves some type of a variance for a setback. Now, we're not contemplating changing zoning, obviously, or anything like that. So, item B, is for the front and the side setback reduction.
22 feet, or 22 and a half feet, I guess is 22.5. That's probably 5 inches. Is that commonplace?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have asked that question.
Well, and I'm not trying to. I'm not advocating one way or the other. But just for the sake of fairness, I just thought that we would make those comments, and I have no idea if we're going to vote to approve or deny. I'm just, it's every license and variance meeting we contemplate a setback reduction.
Okay. And if the neighborhood voted to install sidewalks as they did on Dunn, what out of that 22 feet, what portion of that would the city be allowed to, what is the word I'm looking for? An easement, or I'm not sure the proper technology.
The 22 and a half feet is the front setback, so that's measured from the front property line, not from the street, not from the back of curb. So there's already probably about 8 to 10 feet that's right of way.
Right of way,
and
that's the term.
Then you start the 22 and a half feet. So from the edge of the road, the house is probably going to be, 32, 33 feet from the edge of the road. So the house isn't going to be 22 feet from the street. It's actually 22 feet from the front property line.
Okay.
And then with respect to sidewalks, that's a lot of the right-of-way varies on that particular street from 40 feet. There may be some 50 toward the Concord Road end of it. But it's got very narrow right-of-way, so if, sidewalks in the future, the city doesn't really want to go out and buy $1 million worth of property to put in sidewalks. So, the city would basically say, look, if you want to give us some right-of-way, neighbors throughout the entire roadway to implement sidewalks, then, that's something the city would entertain. But the city's not willing to go out and buy thousands and maybe not millions, but thousands and thousands of dollars of right-of-way just to put in a sidewalk. It's just not cost-effective.
What about the problem with precedent? We're hearing this a lot.
Well, precedent is one thing, but the other issues that we have to look at is there a hardship? Variances are based on hardships. And some hardships, which this one actually does have hardship, and that's the topography of the property. So if you own a piece of property and and in the topography, and topography also being that this thing is inundated with buffers, state and city buffers. So yes, a hardship applies with this particular variance application because of the topography of the property. So if you own the property and you couldn't do something that you wanted to do because the topography was a problem, then you do meet the criteria for a variance application.
Sir, might someone say to you that if you're not able to put in the house that you want on the property, that perhaps that should have been considered before you bought the property?
Not particularly.
But that doesn't...
and also we're getting into kind of opinion and speculation. We're trying to base things off of
Right.
things that we can measure and actual.
But to say to me, well, we can't build what we want, therefore we need to change it. I'm having a little bit of difficulty, I think, understanding that.
Well, and therein lies, kind of the issue. I mean, that's why we have a variance process and a board of people, made up of city staff that can contemplate a variance to some type of a city ordinance, because it's not realistic on one end of the spectrum to say that these are our ordinances and there's no gray. There's no way if you fall within 2 inches outside of a side setback that you can do anything. And no community in the nation operates in that way. And on the other end of the spectrum, it can't just be okay. Well, everybody can just do whatever they want. So this is the attempt to try to contemplate in detail. That's why every variance has to be measured against established ordinances that are established. Things that they're measured by, standards that they're measured by, that are approved by the council. And, with respect to precedent, while it absolutely is true in this community and every, that once you make a certain decision, then that establishes some type of precedent. But what that doesn't mean is that just because you've approved this one type of variance means that you have to approve every one, as Scott just mentioned. Every variance request is contemplated and measured by its own individual facts, and specifically for us as a variance board, they have to demonstrate some type of hardship. It can't just be, well, this is just what I want to do, so give me the variance. They have to demonstrate a hardship, and because of the buffers that currently exist today and how those buffers have changed over the years and affect a house that was built long before these ordinances were in place, then that's why we have this process, and we try to, if this were your home and you wanted to do some type of improvement, then certainly I know that you would want at least some avenue by which you could contemplate a variance request. That's why I'm glad that everybody's here, and I hope to hear from as many people as we can. We're trying to, our objective is to make decisions based off of all the facts. So I definitely appreciate your comments.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we had somebody else. If you could, for the record, please state your name.
My name is Laura Lockwood. I live on Collier Drive in Forest Hills, just around the corner from this. I'm also the president of the Forest Hills Preservation Group. Just like June said, I totally agree with her. We love seeing the people come in, fix up, remodel. Even we've had rebuilds, and that's fine. But you have to show regard for those of us that have already invested in the neighborhood. We chose where we live because of the protections that are put in place. So it's not that he's asking for variances, it's the degree of the change. The setback on the south side, which abuts the Woods home, the Woods, I will say for the record, did not receive a letter either, and they are adjacent to the property. So I find that to be an issue, that the homeowners affected by this were not notified by the builder. So maybe we should give more time for those people to do their homework. But the setback is being dramatically reduced on that side, I believe from 31 or 32 to 9 feet. The 9 feet will encroach upon the 10-foot required setback. On the front, you're going to change it 11 or 12 feet, and then into the buffer. How far in the buffer is he going? He's reducing the 50-foot buffer. How many feet? Are we talking 6 inches? Are we talking 5 feet? I can't find that information. We are reducing the impervious driveway. However, when you expand the house and you increase the roof line and you're probably increasing the pitch, all of that water is guided into the creek. So it's wonderful that he's removing the concrete, which is within the buffer, which was probably never permitted and approved. But you are increasing the runoff just by increasing the size of the house and the pitch of the roof. Is that water going to be guided to the street? Is the water going to be guided to the creek? How is he going to address that change there? It's my opinion to ask for a variance is fine, but the magnitude of what he's asking, it's not one little thing. This gentleman bought this property, saw what there was to work with, totally disregarded that, and he is just going to move forward with what he wants to build. I agree with June. When he looked at the property, that is your time to decide whether or not this is what you want to invest in. What can I build? That home can be redeveloped into something that someone would love to have. We have a lot of older homes in our neighborhood that are small and they are quaint and they are wonderful and people love them and people will buy them. He does not need to turn this into this much larger scale home. So my main concern is the buffer. I do not believe that he should be allowed to encroach into the buffer, and I disagree that because there was already a driveway encroaching on it, that should be a factor in allowing him to do it. We see lots of homes in our neighborhood where people do things without permitting it, and that should not allow for change. That should be torn out, and it should not be allowed to be encroached upon again. So I ask that you please deny this variance based on encroaching on the buffer. Do you guys have any questions for what I've said?
No, but I intend to call staff back up to kind of address some of the concerns that you brought up, because I want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly too, because we're talking about encroachment into a buffer. And at the same time, I want to clarify that, or I want to get staff to clarify that for me and for all of us. And because the way, the testimony that I heard from staff was, it seemed to me that it was going to be, with regard to the stream buffer, that it's going to be a stream buffer improvement.
Well, because he's removing the concrete, but
there's other issues to deal with. The additional impervious surface, hypothetically, if it were approved, the roof gets bigger because there's a 2-car garage. So then you have, more impervious surface that goes into a gutter, that goes into a downspout. Where does that go? I intend to have staff come up and talk about that too as well, and also help me better understand, because I don't understand it as an encroachment just with regard to the stream buffer. I see it as a stream buffer improvement if done by regulation, but if you don't, and I'll allow you,
how many
I'll
feet
allow
is
you
he
additional
going?
comment
We have not
too.
been told that.
Right.
And then the last thing is this rain garden that is supposed to be wonderful. Okay, that's great that the builder will put it in, and I see that as a good thing. However, I don't know that can be a point that we count on to make this decision, because once the homeowner buys that property, there is nothing requiring them to maintain that rain garden. So that could change. This is, and I heard this gentleman saying that it's not really a stream, that it's just a little seasonal. Well, as these homes get bigger and bigger, it is becoming a stream. Not what you truly would consider a flood, but there is a significant amount of water that moves through there. And with each home that gets larger, with more of the trees that get torn down and there's more pavement, this is becoming a real source of water, and it needs to be protected and it needs to be respected. And I just think you're opening a can of worms, and you're making a mistake by allowing that 50-foot buffer to be affected. It should not be. And I would like to see, I guess, in the plan review, if this does get approved, where are we guiding the water? The water needs to be guided to the street. I was speaking with one of our residents, Mike Terry, who obviously we know is very knowledgeable about planning and zoning. This water, as per Cobb County, needs to be guided into the sewer system, should not be guided to that stream. So those are my concerns. And again, reiterate, when you buy these properties, you need to know what you're dealing with. You can't say, well, I've bought it and now I can't do anything with it. Well, then that's unfortunate for you that you didn't do your homework before you bought it. But I think he knew what he was dealing with and is counting on changes being made. Small changes are good. These are some big changes. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. I'll call again for public comment in just a minute, but I would like for Joey, we've heard some valid concerns, and I'd like for you to address, because I know that you've been in conversation with the city engineer in detail with regard to this particular request. Really more, within item C, but we're kind of
Right.
we can't talk about one without the other. But can you talk about some of the addresses? Can specifically with encroachment, specifically with stormwater diversion? Does it go this way or does it go that way? Or what would be the requirements hypothetically if approved? Those types of things.
Yes. Bob and I have worked pretty extensively with city engineer and the and the applicant on this, who hasn't just proposed something and walked away. They've responded to all our concerns in our department and Public Works Department. So the proposal and our recommendation for the condition is that there is peak flow reduction requirement to this proposed plan. We have a conceptual plan, as all these things are at this stage, conceptual. You can't spend thousands of dollars on a plan before you get approval on it. That's just how the process works. These are things that start conceptual, get approval, get fine-tuned in a more detailed plan that gets reviewed by the city engineer and subsequently approved or denied. But that's why we have that staff and pay them to do that. So, second, the wording of these variances, yeah, they may look extensive, but you're taking a legal non-conforming structure that was built prior to these regulations. So the wording, yes, it does look dramatic, but that's not taking into account what's already there. It's just putting on record.
Right.
This is what the proposed endpoint be. Because a legal non-conforming structure doesn't have anything on record to say that is what it is. It didn't need approval. It was built before those regulations. So
what about, I guess, and I kind of, asked you in one or two sentences something that involved 4 or 5 different questions, really. But I guess let's piecemeal it. Let's talk about, because I see, one of the proposed conditions would be that the city engineer shall approve final design of any water quality best management practice measures prior to the issuance of the permit. Mm-hmm. So, that involves a lot of things, but let's just talk about what would be a typical, and maybe Scott can help with this question. What would be a typical handling of stormwater runoff when a roof gets bigger? Okay, so you add the gutters and the downspouts. In this particular situation, specifically to some of the concerns from Ms. Lockwood, what would they need to do appropriately to follow best management practice with regard to stormwater with the stormwater runoff?
Let me address that. Basically, you look at the existing conditions. Basically, you look at the existing conditions and what the impervious surfaces contribute to the overall runoff. In this particular case, it's nearly 25% of the site is impervious. That's existing. and it's within the buffers.
Now, are you talking about the existing driveway or
The driveway and the house,
the
as it
roof?
sits,
Okay, the whole
all
thing.
impervious surfaces.
Okay.
That's existing. What's proposed is to reduce the impervious by taking out the driveway. The addition of the garage doesn't accommodate the total aspect of the existing as it is impervious. In other words, the total runoff is being reduced, even with the garage. And the existing flows, because of topography, generally towards the stream and contributes to the stream flow. The proposed, with the garage and the existing house and the proposed driveway, is less than the impervious as it exists. It still would, because of topography, contribute to the stream, but it would be routed through devices that would meet the Georgia EPD Blue Book requirements for stormwater
Blue
control.
Book standards, yeah.
Right, best management practices.
Right.
Whether it's a rain garden or whatever that particular condition would be, it would still be routed, and it would be slowed down to limit or mitigate stormwater runoff and improve stormwater quality, water quality.
Okay. So within the total lot that makes up this property, the total impervious surface, which includes any poured driveway, concrete or otherwise, and the roof of the existing or the footprint of the existing house, all that is 25%, right, of the total. And as proposed, so because the proposal is to remove the existing driveway, have a different driveway, and add this garage. So when you do those two total comparisons, what was the second number if it were to be approved? So we would go from 25% total impervious to
approximately, it's between 17 and 18%. It's
so somewhere around 17.
With the garage and with the driveway addition, it's being reduced because of the north driveway and the back side apron to the garage removal. It's a net loss of 8% impervious with the proposal.
So what would this property owner be subject to with regard to the EPD Blue Book stuff? You know, we've talked about, I think that if I understand it correctly, there's a couple options, and I know that there's been this idea of what was the name of it, the garden? The rain garden. But that's not the only option, right? Oh, so what are some standards that they're going to have to abide by, hypothetically, as it relates to the Blue Book standards?
Well, short-term issues would be the construction process, erosion sedimentation control measures. Long-term, after the development is completed, then it would be very similar conditions for grass and reduced runoff based on vegetation and based on flow diversion through. And the example was a rain garden. There are other apparatus that are natural in form that it could go through to slow runoff to the stream. Contain it or retain or detain it for short time frames for intense storms. Okay. But it would have to meet the EPD requirements on stormwater design and on the city engineer's stormwater design requirements.
And all of those requirements would have to be met before the final inspection sign off.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
Oh, no, you indicated 8-9%. What am I reading here? The reduction of existing impervious area and the addition of the proposed garage will yield a 26% net reduction in impervious surface.
Yep. It's a 7% reduction, but it's a 26% reduction from current to proposed. So that's 26%. That from currently 23% impervious, proposed 17% impervious.
Okay.
The percentage
Doesn't say
changes.
that here, but
Yeah,
okay.
It does say that.
That's where the number came from.
And while I've got you up here, both Ms. Lockwood and Ms. Jordan mentioned there were some people that they had some concerns about whether or not they were contacted. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I've got a screen in front of me, and I can pull up all the documents and see the scanned version. And one of the titles that I see is certified mail receipts, and I see 4 receipts for certified mail notifications. I know that if I understand it right, the property has to be a but to receive the certified mail. So did we get in touch with everybody we were supposed to get in touch with?
Yeah, the applicant sent notifications to everyone that they are required to send them to, which would be any adjoining property or any adjacent property across the right-of-way, which we have record that they did. I scanned them. I put in the confirmation numbers in USPS that after some neighbors said they didn't get them, and I tracked them, and it said they were mailed. So that's
well, the receipts that we have on Lee Street, I've got 3331, 3350, and 3361 where they were sent, and on Pretty Branch we've got 3366. Those are the 4 that we have.
Yes.
Okay.
And I verified they were sent. That's what our ordinance requires, is that they're sent.
Okay. I want to get the applicant back up here in just a minute, but before I do that, is there anybody else that had any comments or concerns that they wanted to talk about?
Well, we still haven't heard how far.
You can come back up.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Did we hear how far they intend to into the 50-foot buffer we're moving? Did we hear that?
Joey.
They're going no further into the buffer than they already are with the rear portion of the property. So they're going from where it currently is a 0. There's a 0-foot reduction because it's totally in the buffer.
Right. So the current structure already exists in the buffer to include the existing driveway. They're not going to. The request that we have, the application is not an additional encroachment into that buffer that's behind the house.
There's no structure in the buffer. It's driveway. Correct?
Right. And the proposal is for that driveway to come out.
Is the driveway permitted? Was that something that the city ever approved?
I have no idea.
We don't permit driveways, but it is impervious. Impervious material is not allowed in the undisturbed buffer.
Okay.
Therefore, it's an.
Well, I think then the proposal is to remove it. The impervious surface that's in the buffer.
So there won't be any structure in the buffer.
Correct.
That's my question.
There will be no impervious. Right now, there's impervious. There's a driveway in the buffer, and the application is to remove that driveway from the buffer.
This is the thing that the garage is in the buffer, but not where the driveway is.
Right. It's not an encroachment towards the buffer.
Correct.
Then the driveway is what spawns the side setback. Is that right?
The garage is in the side setback, and in the front setback is also within the city's 50-foot undisturbed buffer. However, by allowing this addition, we're able to remove more impactful
right.
encroachments that currently exist.
And the initial application, if I heard you right, initially when community development received this application, it didn't involve. It involved leaving the old driveway that goes into this stream buffer there, and staff said, well, you need to take that out if you're going to do this and add this. We've got to reduce the overall net effect as regarded, as it relates to impervious surface. So the answer to that was to remove the old driveway, which does encroach into the buffer. Who knows when it happened? But that's why I said, and please don't misunderstand, I'm not advocating one way or the other, but just from my perspective, my observation in the facts that I see with regard specifically to stormwater management and the stream buffer, it appears to me to be a stream buffer improvement. Right now there's 25% of impervious surface on this lot, and if approved, it would go down to 17 or 18%, whatever the testimony was. But, because we're kind of blending all these things together, and it makes it confusing even, for me, because we're talking about, the request for a front and a side setback, but we're also, getting into whether or not, what effect this has into the stream buffer. Because I know that, item C, which technically we haven't heard yet, is a variance request for the reduction of the city's 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer and 25-foot impervious. And that's only because the structure as it exists is non-conforming. And there's probably 50% of the houses in the city of Smyrna that fall in non-conforming.
Well, and I guess my thought process is it's unfortunate that the driveway is in what is supposed to be 50-foot buffer, and perhaps that was there before the ordinance was put in place. Okay?
Yep.
But aren't there a lot of times in issues like this when you're dealing with older homes where protections have been put in place after the fact? You may leave what is there. However, if you begin to change it, you now have to adhere to the new requirements. So, okay, so you're saying no part of the house is going to be within the 50 foot. No part of it.
That's not what I said.
Well, if there's a 50-foot setback requirement, you should adhere to that. If you're once you make those changes to the home, you now. It's like
you could not improve this property at all without a variance. So we either leave it as it is, and it is impactful.
Well,
to the stream,
and that's kind of what I was trying to, the point I was trying to make, because of the non-conforming issues of this house and many others. If there's almost literally any improvement request at all, it's going to trigger some type of a variance request because of the newly applied.
Well, only because we're dealing with the stream does it concern me. And my point is, and he seems to be dancing around the issue, if you change what is non-conformant, you now must adhere to the new ordinances put in place. And to say that the home can't be improved without doing all of this, I disagree with you. A home does not have to be huge to be improved. So this is where the preservation group takes issue with what is going on. The ordinance is put there for a reason, to protect the creek, to protect those people that live downstream. And people who should have been notified are sitting here telling you they were not notified. So we probably shouldn't even be making the decision today until we can find out the properties that are directly affected, were they notified? Maybe we need to do signed receipt. The fact that you put it in the mail does not mean that it has been done. So we are putting the information.
Those addresses that I read off were signed receipts. They're certified signed receipts.
No.
Show us, yeah.
Okay.
She's standing here.
We're home all the time.
Okay.
And now, out of the 4 letters that were sent, isn't it curious that
3 are saying they didn't.
3 didn't receive it?
You have a signature, we can
They don't require a signature.
Well, then,
it's just
Return receipt, Mr. Staub?
that's certified mail receipt is the title that I have.
so that's not signed.
Certified mail receipt.
You don't have a signature for it.
the applicant sends.
No, sir. We live at that house.
Yeah, I say.
All right, so let's just kind of regroup for a second. First of all, because it's important that anybody that wants to speak, please speak into the microphone. This is how we record the minutes. So any comments that are made need to be a part of the official record. I apologize. I'm probably responsible for some of that confusion when we talked about signed. I'm looking at a scanned copy of 4 U.S. Postal Service certified mail receipts, which do not have signatures on it. So I'm not disputing. I'm not saying that you got it and you're telling us a story. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that with regard to the official notes that we have, I've got 4 scanned certified mail receipts with the delivery address that it was sent to. That's all I have. I'm not disputing whether or not you got it.
That's what the ordinance
Just a
requires, is that the applicant mail acknowledgement or notification to the adjacent properties that they're asking for variance. The applicant provided us with evidence of that I further investigated and saw that they were mailed. That's what our ordinance
that proves
requires.
they were mailed. It doesn't prove they were received,
No,
right?
it doesn't.
Okay.
That's not what the ordinance requires.
And Ms. Lockwood, I appreciate what you said with your primary concern being the stream buffer, and just kind of for the record, that's our primary concern as well. The overall effect of stormwater mitigation and stormwater management is a huge thing. Because we have to contemplate how it affects the city in its whole, and it's absolutely true that we all understand the level of development and the things that are happening that are exciting, and the growth that's happening here at Smyrna, but we also have to be good stewards and try to contemplate these things on an individual basis. But I just wanted to say that's our primary. That's the reason we're spending so much time talking about this, is because our main concern is what happens to the stormwater. The last thing that we want to do is even contemplate the approval of something that's going to negatively affect the surrounding property with regard to stormwater management or in any negative effect. So before I get the applicant back up, is there anybody else that wanted to make any comments? Okay, well, come on up, and if you would, for the record, state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Janet Harvey. My husband Sam and I live at 3300 Lee Street. We are just up the street, opposite side of the road of this proposed development. I just have a question of what is the percentage of the lot that will be taken up by the new structure and the new driveway and the new garage? Are we going from like 50% structure to land mass, 75%? I'm just curious about that. And that's just my question. I'm wondering if someone can answer that for me.
Okay, Joey, is that something that the community development measures?
That's the 17%.
But I think she's talking about structure to land.
That is
percentages. But now I understood the 17% being total impervious surface
to land.
Okay, so and maybe this kind of halfway answers your question. The currently existing 25% that you've heard staff talk about is the total impervious surface. So that's the square footage of all driveways that are on the property, and the roof structure, the structure footprint itself. So when you add the structure footprint of the existing property and the square footage of the existing driveway, it's around 25% of the lot. And the proposal, the request, once the old driveway's taken out, the new driveway's put in, and even with the addition, that goes down to 17 or 18% of total.
And so when that driveway and parking pad out back are pulled up, there's not going to be any structure there. That's all going to be green space, rain garden, whatever. The structure to be built will be pushed forward toward the curb. Is that correct?
The additional... The new driveway will be on the front of the property towards the curb, and
it's to the south, attached to the south wall.
So everything new that's going to be built is now going to be pushed towards the curb,
or to the right. If you look at the property where the driveway would be to the right of the house, and the proposed two-car garage, I'm assuming, would be to the right of the house.
So it's going to be farther forward than the houses on either side, significantly.
If I understand your question,
yes,
they're not moving the house forward, and they're not going to build the garage on the front of the house. They're going to build the garage on the right side of the house, and the driveway.
They're bumping it up in order to keep all of that back part not developed. So it's got to be closer to the street. Yes, I mean.
Well, we'll get the applicant up in a minute, and
Covered porch, according to the...
It's got to be in the microphone. I apologize. I know it's
Sorry,
fine.
I forget. I am looking at the proposed site plan, and it shows what I believe is, and I may be wrong because I'm not savvy with this, the original boundaries of the house, and it says above it, covered porch. So if I understand that correctly, that means then that the actual blueprint of the old house is being moved up the width of the covered porch. Am I correct?
Well, and we'll get the applicant to answer to that. But
Okay, because that being the case, then they are moving the house up if you count the covered porches.
if they're adding a porch, yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, yeah, they're not moving the house, but you would be adding a front porch, and again, we'll let the applicant. And I believe, was there somebody else? Please come forward. State your name.
Although Mary has left, and I would like her to hear my comments. Okay. Maybe, Roy, as you just pointed out, by the way, I'm Bruce Hallmuller. I live at 3372 Pretty Branch. So my property is next door to the Jordans.
Okay.
So I am, I guess, diagonal or catty corner to the property in question. You just mentioned a second ago that 2C hasn't been discussed. The developer hasn't talked yet. So maybe while Mary's out, we'd like to hear about 2C.
Well, we have to take action on 2B first before we move on to 2C. And the reality is that the vast majority of the discussion that we have relates directly to item 2C. I mean, because we're talking about how you heard staff talk about how one kind of is dependent on the other. The overall intent, I think, from the applicant's perspective, and I'll let you clarify in just a minute, is to remove the old driveway, add a driveway with a front-loading side garage to the right side of the house, which would be the south of the property, and the tie-in is the overall effect to stormwater mitigation and stormwater management as it relates specifically to the stream, whether it's seasonal or not, the stream buffer and those types of things. So Mary's back now. So
Fantastic. Thank you. Hey, Mary, I'm Bruce Hallmuller. I live at 3372 Pretty Branch. My property is diagonal or catty corner to the property in question. First of all, I'd just like to say, in relation to 2B, I'm not in favor of the setback change from 35 feet to 22.5 or the 10 to 9 foot. And second of all, I probably would agree to a new stream buffer improvement when we talk about 2C. There was 3 comments that were made today that I just make a statement about them, or somebody can clarify them or whatnot. But Mr. Hall did say that the 35 to 22 feet would be in relation or correlation to others in the neighborhood, maybe at some time during this process, find out specifically to Forest Hills and maybe, Dunlea, Pretty Branch, somewhere in there, if there are indeed homes, 22 feet from the street. Another statement that was made, Joey, you talked about the seasonal creek, or Pretty Branch Creek, that is the stream that's running through. It's not on any stream maps, and the engineer has said that this is a water of significance. When I purchased the house 3372 Pretty Branch in 1994, I had researched that property, which is right directly south of the property we're talking about, and that entire piece of land was under a floodplain. Now, Pretty Branch and Lee Street were not part of the city back then, so I did all my research up at Marietta, and I decided not to buy that land because it was under a floodplain. Well, the developer that came in was able to change or raise up or whatnot, and as you know today, there is a home there. But this seasonal creek, if you talk to any of the neighbors, the 100-year flood happened on Pretty Branch Creek back in the mid-'60s. You talk to, God rest his soul, the Joe Latanzis that lived here at the time, and Don Caswell that lived on the street. All of that area. There's a young man just cutting down some trees behind my house last week saying that I grew up on King Springs, and my parents remember in the mid-'60s, this was all underwater here. So granted, what we're talking about sits up a little bit. But as you come to the bottom of Lee Street there, you ask anybody around the mid-'60s, it was underwater. And that 100-year flood just hit Austell within, 6-7 years ago. And then the third comment that was made, Joey said that the city engineer, we have an open item here, the city engineer still must explain or research the land disturbance permit. So I'd like to see and hear that when that's completed. But to finalize my comments, I just want to talk about Forest Hills in general and the developers that have come in, and a little bit of history that happened on Pretty Branch back in June of 2008. I mean, we have these plans. Joey, thank you for sending out these plans. You have these plans here, And across the street from me is 200 foot of curb that the developer needed a variance to build 2 homes. And the same thing happened. Here's the plans from June 2008. My neighbors all sat in my living room with the developer that was from across the street and laid out all these plans. And from what we heard from him, it was, I mean, just like we're talking about today, what's the dwelling going to look like? What's this going to look like? You know, you throw all this out. Mr. Hall is a businessman, and if he's going to go through the variance committee, P&Z, city council, whatever we determine on the variance is what he's going to build. When the developer came to the Pretty Branch neighborhood and said, okay, I'll buy this, I'm going to put 2 single-level brick ranches, I stood in front of city council at this podium, and I agreed for the variance. All 3 of us agreed for the variance, across the street and the 2 on the side. Now, the properties that were built there, you can see today, are gigantic. I mean, they're huge. Now, the couples that bought them are very, very nice. We like them so much. But again, it's just, whatever we determine on the variance is just going to be an outline for what's going to be built. Throw this away. That guy's a businessman back there. If he's going to go through this much trouble, we're going to get the 22 feet, you're going to get away from the creek, you're going to be in a floodplain, he's going to build it up as high as he can go, just like they did across the street. Because in this day and age, money talks. And these kids, like I said, that live across the street from us, they're wonderful. But now we have $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 homes on Pretty Branch, and it does not conform to what Forest Hills looks like with the 50 to 60-year-old homes that are now being renovated from the inside. So, again, I disagree with the setback from 35 to 22 and from 10 to 9. We're just establishing some guidelines and some rules for another home that does not fit the neighborhood to be built. And I'm anxious to hear more about 2C from Mr. Hall regarding the stream buffer improvement.
Okay, so just before you sit back down, so I can make sure that we get your concerns answered, because I know you mentioned a couple times floodplain. I'd like to get staff to talk about that, and also, you know, whenever this board contemplates a variance request, almost every one that we approve has a standard stipulation that they have to build it in substantial compliance with how they've applied for. So this is not a carte blanche application that only includes a perimeter and then they can just do whatever they want to within that perimeter. This is a very specific application to include every detail. And so, and the way I understand it, the application includes the request is for the addition of this 2-car garage with this new driveway, remove the old driveway, and do some work to the front porch. It does, and then they would have to build it as they proposed within this. They can't just build whatever they want to. So, but I definitely hear what you're saying. So I'm going to call Joey back up to talk about floodplain. But there was another issue close to the floodplain that you wanted clarification on?
No, it was Pretty Branch Creek, I mentioned, the land disturbance permit from the city engineer's office. And then, at the beginning, Mark had said that a setback from 35 to 22.5 feet was in relation or correlation to others in the neighborhood. So, I was just wondering, wondering about others on Lee Street.
Okay.
Dunn that now has a sidewalk and things like that.
So, Bob or Joey, could you guys come up and talk about let's talk about floodplain first, because it was my understanding, and this could be completely wrong, but first of all, floodplain designations aren't done by the city. Is that right? It's a federal map. The FEMA process that involves the what is in a floodplain and what is not. And there's varying degrees of floodplain, 100-year, 500-year floodplain. Is this property in a floodplain?
The data that we reviewed does not show it in the FEMA floodplain area.
Okay, so, and I'm asking you to kind of speculate here for a minute, but are you, just off the top of your head, are you aware of similar setback variances in that area, in that neighborhood? And, almost hate to even ask you that because you need to go back and research. I know that there's similar variances all over the city, but specifically within that area. Are there, to the best of your recollection?
Specific to front porch addition, no, but the adjoining north property, there are 2 parcels. I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago, a variance was requested to add an accessory structure, a pool. The owner actually owns two parcels, and that pool was approved, and it meets the setback requirements and it meets the other issues. But that's the adjoining north property.
And other properties on Lee Street, one that was the last license and variance board hearing was front setback reduction on Lee Street. Can't remember that address.
I can't recall what.
It was in the.
And that was a front setback, yeah.
Yes, for the front porch.
Yeah.
And this proposal it basically just makes the front of the house square. That the garage and the front porch are just one continuous line. So, it is an existing brick ranch house with a little 2-step entry. So you've seen the elevations that are proposed in the application. That's what, if approved, that's what is approved. It's not an open-ended request.
Right.
So that it is there are architectural elements in that proposal that add to the aesthetics of that existing structure. That like anything external to the current structure could not be done without a stream buffer and setback variance, because it is all in either a setback or the buffer, the whole property. And if we strictly apply those regulations, it's a regulatory taking that the city ends up paying, eminent domain or whatever to obtain that property, because essentially it's undevelopable, but we've already given property rights to it. So there's a trade-off there, and there's Supreme Court precedent that, Fifth and 14th Amendment, that these are things that have been decided by courts, that we can't just say, you can do nothing with your property. So
anybody in this situation, if they were to have a similar approval for a similar request, the tie-in, and I'm trying to answer or help with some issues that Mr. Hammermill brought up. It's not just a sign-off by the city, go forth and be merry. Throughout the process, from beginning with the issuance of the permit to beginning construction all the way through to final, there is a tie-in with city engineers, specifically with regard, as well as others, but with regard to stormwater mitigation and stream buffer improvements. And it also not only goes outside the city as well, it involves the EPD with the state. And that's a continuous process from beginning to end that's regulated by us and the state. Is that right?
The variance is the initial process.
Right.
That if he don't get an approval on that, they don't have to do anything else, because why would you? So once they get, if they do get approved, or if they get denied, but assuming there is an approval, the next process is to present building plans, grading plans, erosion control, water quality.
And those all have to be reviewed
reduction.
and approved, and
that gets submitted to the city engineer primarily for the land disturbance activity that he will review, and then when they meet his requirements, they will get approved. We will permit the project, inspect it, and so on until it's met all requirements. And
all right. So before I call the applicant back up, Anybody have any questions, or go ahead?
Just to clarify that I understand what you were saying, the house itself is in the stream buffer. Is that correct?
The existing structure.
So if we were going to completely comply, you'd have to tear down the house, and then you couldn't put anything there.
Correct.
Basically. Okay.
Now, when you say the buffer, there's the 25 foot, 50 foot, and the 75 foot, and the entire structure that's existed for all these years is within the 75 foot, and between the 50 and the 75. Is that right?
Everything that's not in the front setback is in a buffer of
Right.
some type.
Right, because the
front
75
half
foot
and
goes
back
up
half.
all the way up to the front. Yeah.
Because the tributary, whatever we want to reference it as,
Right.
it runs halfway through the property.
Right.
So the back part of it has a buffer, the front part of it has a buffer.
It almost splits the property in the center.
Correct.
Just about, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, if we could, we'll have the applicant come back up, please. Just wanted to, for the sake of fairness, also, you've heard the staff comments. You've heard some of the concerns by the people that live in the area, and
Sir.
you wanted to go ahead and just add whatever you need to add to it.
Yeah, and I appreciate all the comments from the neighbors, and I hate that the notifications were not delivered. I would like to point, if you look at the receipts that you have, you can actually see where I was charged for signature receipt and delivery. It's one of the call outs.
Yeah, there was a payment.
Yeah, it's
for
itemized in there, and one of those is signature receipt. It's in that actual receipt, so you can verify that. Second, I'd kind of like to make a point about, and the staff did allude to the fact that the existing stream is not necessarily documented as a stream or a tributary on their existing maps. When I purchased this property, obviously I did my research, and that was not an issue. Only when I started working directly with the staff on a very consistent basis, these gentlemen and also Mr. Randall, the city engineer, was when I was notified that we were going to have to work with the state EPD department to do something to improve the actual property, which is where I came in, and because of the 25-foot state buffer, that's where I was in this process is when that was actually brought to our attention that we were going to have to take those steps. We already have secured some work with a design firm, an environmental design firm, to basically, it's the same company who actually did this formal survey for us. They do this kind of work all over the city of Atlanta, state of Georgia. The rain garden is what was proposed, particularly because of the fact that we're reducing the overall impervious space within the property by 26% of, it's an effective 8% reduction, but it's actually a 26% reduction in the actual stormwater runoff, or the stormwater that we would actually have to manage within the property. So we've already been in contact directly with the state. They're, of course, always very supportive of any kind of improvement projects. So they're kind of standing by waiting for us to contact them. Obviously, the next step, or the first step, would be to get the approval here before we went and invested the capital to work with the state. But our commitment specifically to not only the community but to the staff was to make sure we do everything within the Blue Book standards, the Georgia Stormwater Management, making sure that we design and implement a solution that's sustainable to handle that stormwater runoff. The fortunate part, or the good part for everybody involved, is that we are reducing that amount of stormwater runoff from what actually exists today. And one thing I'd like to point out that really didn't come up at all, based on the zoning of this property, everybody within the current ordinances are allowed a 35% impervious space percentage so that would actually be the property, or I'm sorry, the actual structures, the driveways, all of that kind of thing. Is in regard to one of the questions that came up. We're actually reducing that to about 17.5% is where we're looking at doing. But even if we only took the property that was inside the stream buffer to the street, we're still only at 28.4% impervious structure. So driveways, house, porches, all of the, garages, all of that kind of stuff is still well within the actual ordinance, the zoning ordinance that are standard today. So if we just forgot all of the land that's on the backside or the east side of that creek, we're still within the city ordinances, and well within conformance of that 35% for an R15 zone property, at 28.4% there. Like I mentioned, we're actually only going to be implementing 17.4% percentage for the overall property, but we're still well within, even if we took out the other side. There was a comment about the water being diverted to the street, obviously because of the topography and the house being below the actual street level. That's nearly impossible. So we have to figure out how we're going to divert that water back around the sides and in the back. Of course, like I said, we're going to follow the Blue Book standards, and also everything we're going to do within compliance of the Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission manual. So we're even through construction, after, and making sure we implement a sustainable solution that the future homeowner can do. For example, a rain garden, just to give some clarification on what that actually is, that is one of the options that's available in the stormwater management manual, the Blue Book, that we've referenced. And what it is it's a very specific landscape engineered solution that includes a lot of revegetation, particularly types of vegetation that's indigenous to the location, and that's also very water absorbent and things like that. Things like maple trees, ferns. It'll actually improve the overall aesthetics, the look of the property, and provide the stormwater management that is necessary. If it's determined that something in addition to that is required, obviously we're going to do whatever we need to do to make sure we're in compliance with that stormwater management manual. And let's see, what are some? There was a lot of comments, so I'm trying to cover them all. The creek not being documented, that was something that was kind of a surprise to us. And then one of the issues that, and I think Joey talked about it, was we have already provided elevations of what the future property would look like at completion. We fully commit to stand behind that. And there are several other houses that are within the setbacks that we've talked about, even reduced setbacks, even on Lee Street if you go up further toward Concord. And I think it's important to point out to everybody that everybody keeps referencing the setback or the distance from the house to the street in terms of the setback number. I want to reiterate to the neighbors that's actually to the property line, and we did cover that briefly earlier, that there is right-of-way section in there, which is an additional 8 to 10 feet depending on every street's a little bit different, but so it's actually further from the street than the 22.5. We're actually at 30 plus. There are several houses on Lee Street that are much closer than that 30 feet from the street. Like I said, if you just kind of go up the hill a little bit before you get to Concord, a little bit up past Collier and places like that. So, what else? I think if you guys have any questions for me, like I said, I knew there were a lot of comments and I tried to capture them all, make sure I provided answers or adequate responses to those.
The garage addition, what are the dimensions of the garage?
I think
outside dimensions.
The outside dimensions are, I think we're at 23 feet wide, and give me just a second here. I've actually got it. It would effectively make the right side of the house on the south side. It would effectively make that side of the house 32 and a half feet. So, and then by 20, I think it's 23 or 24 feet wide, which is a standard garage width. The depth behind that, we're looking at, obviously we need some kind of entrance to the house, and so there's a little bit of space directly behind the immediate garage that would be in between that and the back wall of the house. So
the depth of the garage is how many feet?
32 feet 5 inches. So that would be the full right-hand side of the house. So from front to back would be 32
from
feet.
the new covered porch area to the existing rear wall of the house is what you're going to cover on the depth.
Yes, sir. And that would be uniform all the way on both sides of the house.
And then the width of the garage is what?
It's the standard width. I believe it's 23 feet. If you can bear with me just a second, Kim's actually my architect, so 23. Yes, sir. That's what we designed. That's enough room to put 2 reasonable sized cars in with one garage.
So your normal garage door width, the small garage door width is what?
It's I
9
believe
feet.
For a double, it's I think it's 18. And then you have to have, side on base, on the inside, so you can actually get in and out of your vehicle on both sides. So for a 2-car garage, that's what we're looking at here. It's I believe the standard garage door size is 18 feet, plus your extra footage. You've got a couple of feet on each side for ingress and egress into your vehicle while you're in the garage. So you can't just pull the cars in and you got to get in and out.
So what's the width?
23.
That a question or is that an answer or a question?
No, it's 23.
23.
Yeah, 23. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Any other questions for the applicant?
The driveway, new driveway that goes to the garage.
Yes, sir.
You have any heartache if a stipulation may be made that it be pervious?
I actually did discuss that with the city engineer, Mr. Randall, and I said if we wanted to further reduce the impervious space, I could actually do that as a paver type solution as opposed to concrete. I thought bringing it down to 17.4% was pretty good. That would actually reduce it by another, what are we looking at, 627 feet. So it probably drops it down another couple of percent to around 15%. Again, we're allowed 35% on the property. We're already at almost half that, and we're only at 28.4% if we only count the piece of property from the west side of the stream bank to the street. But if that were a stipulation, I would be happy to comply with that.
I'm looking at a picture of the current house right now, and I don't see any gutter system at all. Is that correct?
Those had actually already been
taken off.
There was a lot of wood rot, but we actually fully plan to do a gutter system and divert the water, in an efficient and responsible manner to whatever solution ends up getting implemented to the back. Right now, my environmental engineers are recommending the rain garden because it's the least impactful on the actual stream buffer. There's other solutions that require a lot of digging, a lot of major, invasion to the ground. The stream buffer is more of a engineered landscape that creates a small berm up to the edge of the stream bank and then revegetates everything backwards from that back toward the house, with very specific and direct placement of certain types of plants in certain areas to capture that water as it flows back.
And then don't take this the wrong way. I'm going to ask Joey just to verify some of the numbers that you've thrown out. I personally don't know. I just want to verify because correct me if I'm wrong, but you've referenced a couple of times this allowance of a total impervious surface of 35%, I believe was the number with regard to the zoning, which I think is R15.
Yes, sir.
I believe.
Yes.
Bob, can you? That's correct. Okay, so that means that anybody within R15 with regard to single family can have up to 35% of the total square footage can be impervious of a lot. Okay. And currently we're around 25, and if approved, it would be 17 or 18% as currently requested.
Yes, sir. The exact number is 23.5% currently. And
we're getting into some confusing. I know we're talking about total volume from 25% down to 17%, but the net effect, that's where the other 20-something percent,
26%,
the measurable reduction of the actual runoff is an actual 26% reduction of runoff mitigation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because that's a little confusing. Maybe it's just me, but
well, I did throw another number out at you guys too, and that was the 28.4%. But that was, say, hypothetically, we said the land, and even for stormwater management purposes, the land, we have to use the land to the west side of the creek because everything else is not accessible. Even with that, within the current standards of the R15 zoning, for the total impervious space, against that, we're only at 28.4%. So we're still well below the zoning ordinances for impervious space to actual land mass.
Okay.
Yes, sir. But by our implementing our proposed solution, we're at 17.4% of the total piece of the property, which again is approximately half of what the zoning currently
of the
allows
35,
for.
yeah.
Yes, sir, to be within compliance.
Right.
So.
Okay. If you have comments, I'm going to ask you to step up. You can. Come on up. Step up and state your name, please.
My name is Kim Waddleton, and I prepared these drawings for Mark, and I was involved in some of the design decisions. And I just want to say a couple of things in support of the approval of the variance. In regards to the 2B, just the setback variances. So this property, as it exists, is 31.2 feet from the property line. And we are proposing to add approximately 8 feet to the front of that property as a front porch and then extend to the side with a 2-car addition. We're following the existing line of the house, so that in effect reduces the setback from the property line to 22.5 feet because of the angle of the house. We had a choice here, either to build forward towards the setback or to build back into the stream buffer when we were adding that garage. And if 2B is not approved, the other option would be to move back into the stream buffer to build this garage, which again is going to cause more problems and I think have a more detrimental impact to the property. We are doing this in order to build the property up to the current market standard of buyer expectations of a 2-car garage. This is especially important considering that we have listened to the city's requests in removing current access to the existing 1-car garage. So we have found, I think, what is an acceptable compromise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Thank you, Kim. The existing garage for this particular house, I think it provides a little context. The foundation of this house is actually granite stones, big giant granite stones that are 14 to 16, 18 inches wide, done around. It's not a typical cinder block. Or
how old is the house?
It was built in the I think it was 64. 55 actually.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was 55. Thank you, Bob. So it was actually a stacked granite stone foundation, and that 1-car garage was existing with that house. So that driveway, for all intents and purposes, would have had to have been accessible by some kind of hard or impervious surface to get to that driveway.
Since 55, yeah.
Yes,
one way or the other, they had to get into it.
Again, it's not like it was a poured foundation or poured in place foundation or a cinder block foundation that could have easily been cut out and added later. It was designed that way. So by working with the city and the engineers, trying to improve the overall green space on the property. We did make a compromise to remove that large amount of impervious space, improve the property per the Georgia Stormwater Management recommendations and manuals, and then be able basically to convert that one-car garage parking that's currently there to an easily more accessible two-car garage on the front of the house, which actually provides a little bit, better safety security for the future homeowners that would, like to ingress and egress without having to necessarily go up and down stairs every time. It's just like Kim said, it's for kind of current market standards and requirements.
Okay.
So main level garage is highly sought after. So.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Any other public comment? Okay. Ms. Lockwood, come on back up.
Okay, so after the architect spoke, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, it's a pretty large garage. 30 feet deep is pretty deep. I mean, they could fall within the required setback of 10 feet if they would scale that garage back just a little bit. The front porch is 8 feet deep. It's very pretty. But they could change the front porch to fall within pretty darn close to the required setback to the street. These are choices he's choosing not to make. And the statements are being made, well, we can't tell people they can't develop it. This property is undevelopable. I disagree. The plan that he has, if he makes some changes to it, he can come pretty darn close to staying within the requirements that we have. And again, it would be to lose the front porch. It would change the look of the house. However, that's 8 feet deep. Do we have to have that 8 foot deep front porch that brings it that much closer? Add 8 feet to 22.5 and you've got 30.5, and you're only asking for a 1 foot variance. Because right now we're saying it's 31 or 32 setback. And then the garage, you can have a garage that's plenty big enough for the cars that you want, but if he would take a foot or two off the back of the garage, it would move that back corner to well within the setback requirements. Changes can be made. He can build his big house, and it's about compromise. He's putting a bigger house on that lot than what is supposed to be there. Change the plan and make it fit. Don't change the setbacks to suit your own needs. It's not that the lot is not developable. It's that he is choosing not to put something there that fits. Look at that garage. It's big. It doesn't need to be 30 feet deep. Change it. The front porch doesn't have to be that big. Change it.
Thank you. Anybody else that'd like to speak? Okay, come forward.
Staff is not to be argumentative. I just want the facts. This whole property, existing condition, is in the front. It is already in the front setback. It is non-conforming to the front setback as it was built in 1950. It is 31 feet from the front property line and some inches. So that's
any
a illegal
change,
non-conforming.
a 12-inch change it would require.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
And it is in the state city undisturbed buffer and the city 75-foot impervious buffer as it is. Therefore, without a variance, the only thing that could be done would be internal to the existing structure. No modifications made to the outside of the existing walls. That it just couldn't happen.
Okay. Thank you. Ma'am?
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, make sure I'm understanding things. When we talk about setback from the curb, and that this house moving closer to the curb is, quote, consistent with others north of Collier, it's important that we realize that Lee Street was not a cookie-cutter cut-through with every house correct in the same line. The houses that he's referring to are one-story, 1,000 square foot, probably at best, houses that were built in some of the cases 1920s, 1930s, when Lee Street was not Lee Street. It was a dirt road. And in the last 100 years, Lee Street has widened. I have seen my own front yard, I've seen my own house creep forward when it's not moving. So to say that the house setback is consistent, there is no such thing as consistent on Lee Street because of the changes in the road. My only concern, again, is aesthetically. We're going from a one-story house to an almost three-story looking house that is pitched forward. We're seeing it already on Lee Street. When there's a variance to move a house closer to the curb, that house pitches forward and dwarfs the road, dwarfs the other street, and you can measure all you want to and use consistency with the 1,000 square foot single-story houses, but that's not the same. I just want to be sure that we're clarifying that moving that house farther up forward to the curb does not make it, quote, consistent with other houses. The size and the towering of that house does not make it consistent with those 1,000 square feet, one-story houses. Just want to clarify.
Thank you. All right, for the sake of fairness, we'll allow one more. Come on.
It's I understand her point. I'd like to point out to the committee here that with the topography of the house, being the house below the street, even with the elevations that we provided, it's really not, towering to the sky. It's, I think, from the street level itself, we're only talking an elevation of somewhere around 17 or 18 feet, which is significantly lower than, say, the houses across the street, which are built on a hill with a two-story. The house diagonally, two houses down diagonally up the street is actually a three-story house built on top of the hill that is quite massive. I don't know if anybody has really taken the time to look at some of the dimensions here, but this house realistically is only going to be about 2,500 square feet. It's not a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot $1 million home like some of the ones on Lee Street further down toward Collier, or some of the ones, two doors down or up that did go very, very high, that are 2 stories with the roof with, some additions built on top of the hill. So I think with the proposal we've put forth, the design is consistent with a lot of the bungalow / craftsman style houses that are being built in the neighborhood that have been recently approved, recently built, whether they are remodels or whether they're new construction. So that's just like to throw that out for consideration.
If you move that rear wall of the garage forward to comply with the 10-foot setback, how deep will the garage be?
Well, actually, we have, in the plans that we had submitted, the basic plans actually show a laundry room behind the garage, because right now there's no laundry room within the house. Currently, there's no direct access to the basement of the house, so there are laundry machines in the basement, which people have to go outside and around the house to access. So we proposed, like many houses, putting the laundry room directly behind the actual garage. We can't necessarily move, that back line back, because that would start putting us further back into the 50-foot buffer and closer to the state 25-foot buffer. But that's kind of where we're at. So that, like I said, that elevation or that depth of the property is 32 feet, but that includes the garage and, like I said earlier, some space between the garage and the actual back wall of the house.
But you can't.
The laundry room, per se.
But what I asked was, if you move that back wall to comply with the 10-foot side yard setback, what depth dimension will the garage have at that point?
It wouldn't necessarily be the movement of we'd have to move the property in from the right to the left to hit the back or hit the side setback. Is that what you're asking? We'd have to move it to the right, which would basically shrink the width of the garage by 1 foot.
Looks like it's. No, you'd have to move the rear wall, where you say you're going to put your laundry room toward the street.
Oh, if I moved it forward to get
Yeah.
it out of the setback,
Yeah.
that would probably actually push because it's not a straight line, so it would actually push the house probably another 2 feet forward because it is on an angle. So it would to pull the 1 foot out of the side variance to move it forward to get it far enough out of the because the house is built on an angle on the property. It's not built perpendicular to the property lines. Since it's built at a kind of a twisted right angle, if you move that forward, you actually have to move it forward further than the 1 foot to get outside of that line, because if you think of it as a triangle. Does that make sense? So you probably end up moving it about 1.5 feet to 2 feet forward to get it out of that side setback. Does that answer your question?
No, I'm not, that's so.
It may be something that the staff could help answer potentially.
I thought maybe the architect could answer.
Or
But
Kim,
Yeah, can you say it again?
to reduce the depth size of the garage, leaving the front wall where it is and moving the back wall toward the front, how many feet are you going to reduce it by on depth to comply with the 10-foot side yard setback?
from here to here.
So I don't have that exact dimension here, but if the 9-foot setback is the one of concern, we do have room to put a chamfer on that corner, and that would solve the problem as well. I think that would solve it a little easier. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, put a chamfer at the corner.
Yeah, we could do that.
That would be acceptable as well.
All right. Question for staff, though.
Question for staff?
Yeah. So Joey, is this one variance request or two?
Well, that is
Is
embedded. It
B-
has two, because there's a side setback and a front setback, both for that garage.
So if when we make a motion, we're making a motion for
Both.
two variances on one.
That's the way that it was, because of the iterations of this plan as it evolved. It was a side that became also a front because of the reduction of the impervious area in the back. But the motion can be modified to, if it eliminates the side setback reduction, or however that is worded.
Yeah.
If the board would like to, make a motion to approve only the front.
Oh, well, okay. All right, I just was wondering. I want to make sure it was one item.
The minimum floor area for R15 zoning also is 2,000 square feet for a structure. So you think that this house is non-conforming as it is because it is under 2,000 square feet. And that's one of the other just variables here that we have to balance. Like it's non-conforming in some degrees that this plan brings it into conformance with. And it's a balance of whether the board would like to see, how they would like to see those balances developed.
Well, I get to me, the primary concern is the protection and or improvement of the stream buffer. I mean, the last thing that we want to get into the business of doing, this is just Roy's opinion, is to continue to approve variances that have cumulative negative effects on areas as it regards to, with regard specifically to stormwater mitigation, to water runoff. So I realize, again, I'm trying to keep this separated. Right now we're technically contemplating a front setback and a side setback. There's been some conversation about, well, can you do this if we just clip that back far right corner and make it a chamfer, as the architect stated, then that would, because really the side setback is just a foot, so yeah, you could get rid of the side setback reduction, but is that really the sticking point, is the far back right corner of this proposed? And I don't see that as being the primary issue of contention.
And it is
again,
just the back corner, because
it's the far back corner on the south side of the property, which if that's what the board does, that's fine. But to me, the protection, from what I've heard from both sides, to me, ends up being that. And again, we're kind of getting into C, but my primary concern is the protection of the stream buffer, and I see this as proposed, albeit wholly. I see this as proposed an improvement on the stream buffer. I definitely understand your concerns, but you have to understand also, from our perspective, a lot of the concerns that you guys have, very valid concerns, but they deal with subjective things, and how does it look, how is it impactful? And I'm not saying that we don't or can't consider those things. I'm saying that we have rules that we have to follow, and ways in which it guides us to help us make a decision, especially a decision that's contentious. People don't want it and some people do. What's the right thing to do? And I think in that situation for us, we have to fall back on things that we know are absolutely important. And as we've already stated, the cities, I was going to say in the last 100 years, I mean, really in the last 10 years, has grown substantially, not only in its density, but in its population, and all indicators are pointing towards that continued growth. So I think that it's important for any body or any hearing to really prioritize a lot of things, not that other things aren't a priority, but definitely for us, a top priority is trying to manage or mitigate additional negative effects as it regards, as we put more rooftops in Smyrna, then obviously that's more stormwater we have to mitigate, and at some point there's a line that we don't want to cross. And I think that as long as we can continue to really take the stance of the protection of stream buffers and stormwater mitigation, then at least for me personally, that's what we should be doing. But is there any other comments? I know that we've spent a good bit of time on this one issue, and we can be here all day if that's what we want to do. But I want to make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to say whatever they wanted to say. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, so if everybody's made the comments that they want to make, if there's no further discussion, I'll contemplate a motion.
All right, make a motion to approve variance request V15-036 to allow a reduction of front yard setback from 35 feet to 22.5 feet. And the motion is also not to approve the setback reduction of 10 feet to 9 feet. 0.42 acres, land lot 556, 3351 Lee Street, with the following stipulations. Approval of the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan submitted with the variance application. City engineer shall approve final design and any water quality best management practices prior to the issuance of a building permit. Water quality shall be approved in accordance with the Georgia, or approved by the city engineer in accordance with the Georgia Blue Book regulations. EPD buffer variance must be obtained by the applicant. Removal of the asphalt, drive and parking area. The patio area must be made of impervious material. The buffer must be restored prior to final inspection. And the driveway material, other than the apron that would appear in the right-of-way, must be made of impervious material. Make that informed motion.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that's seconded, but for the sake of clarity, before I call for the vote, this motion is to approve the front setback request only, with the stated stipulations that you have on record. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So this motion, as made and properly seconded, would not approve the side setback and contained within 2B. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. Motion's approved 3-0. Next item on the agenda is 2C, public hearing variance request V15-037, allow the reduction of the city's 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer and 25-foot impervious stream buffer, 0.42 acres, land lot 556-3351 Lee Street, Park and Property Solutions. If we would, let's go ahead and have staff come back up first. I believe that we've probably talked about everything that we need to talk about, but if there's any additional as it relates, because really, as we've spent the last bit of time talking about, they're correlated. So one is dependent on the other, and I believe that with regard to the impact on the stream buffer, that we've had a lot of conversation. But having said that, I want to offer anybody with any additional relative information to come forward, and we'll start with city staff.
The only issue that would change V15037 is the approval in 036 of the impervious, and it would change the percentages. And that's really all the discussion we had at this point suffices, except those percentage changes would reduce the proposed plan from 17 to approximately 15 or so % lot coverage.
But with regard specifically to the effect on the stream buffer, as stated earlier, this is the proposal involves the removal of existing impervious surface.
Correct.
That is located directly within the center of the stream buffer or close enough to it, and the restoration of the buffer by Blue Book standards.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions for staff? The applicant have any additional information to add with regard to this? Let the record show that he does not. This is a public hearing. If you'd like to make comments specifically to item 2C, I ask that you step forward at this time. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve variance request V15-037, allow the reduction of the city's 50-foot stream allow reduction of the city's 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer and 25-foot impervious stream buffer, 0.42 acres, land lot 556, 3351 Lee Street. Parton Property Solutions. Make that in form of motion.
Second.
We have a motion to approve is properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. Motion passes 3-0. Next item on the agenda is 2D, public hearing variance request V15-038 to allow increase in fence height from 4 to 6 feet within front yard at 0.46 acre land lot 416-865 Bank Street. Applicant is Evan Wing. Is the applicant present? Mr. Wing, if you'd step forward, please, and state your name, and we ask that you speak into the microphone for the sake of the minutes.
Hi, my name is Evan Wing. I'm the current resident and owner of 865 Bank Street.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your fence. It's my understanding that the fence it currently exists. So you had the fence installed, and you were notified in some way that it was outside what was allowable, and therefore you would need a variance.
Correct. My wife and I purchased the home in late June. Right after we purchased it, it became quite apparent that we were going to have to install a fence because we're at the corner lot at the corner of Eastfield and Bank. And any traffic coming down Eastfield can easily see into the backside of our house, backyard. So in addition to the security and additional privacy requirements, we also have a very athletic dog that needs the additional space to run around, and she is very precocious and curious, so she will get out. So we need a 6-foot fence to prevent her from running around the neighborhood and being a nuisance. So we went ahead, I called the city and tried to do the best I can of applying due diligence, making sure I was applying and meeting any code requirements. Obviously, I missed something because as a corner lot, I've now learned that my side yard, even though it's the side of my house, is adjacent to Eastfield, and as a result, it's a front yard and has all the front yard code stipulations. So, but the fence had already been built at that point in time. So, obviously, we want to be able to make sure to apply for this variance so we don't have to tear down the fence, reconstruct it to meet the code for that front, side yard adjacent to Eastfield.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
So what kind of dog do you have?
She is a Catahoula and Whippet mix.
Any pictures of it?
So it's a cattle dog mixed with a running dog.
So that sucker can jump over a 4-foot fence?
Oh, yeah.
What about the back? The photographs that were provided for show the Eastfield side and Bank Street. What's going on in the back?
It's just a tree line in between my house and
is there a fence back there?
There is a fence. It's a 6-foot fence, yeah.
Okay.
Same.
Fine.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, I'll call it Bob Thorne, Community Development.
The background was described by the applicant accurately. The 865 Bank Street is a corner lot. The condition by code for a corner lot is that the short side is considered the front, and that the side, longer side, is considered the secondary front yard.
And that can be confusing, right? Because even though technically, from all other perspective, it's the side of the house.
It's the side of the house.
By the interpretation of the ordinance, it's also has to be considered the front.
That's right, because it fronts a street.
Right.
But code allows the reduction of a front yard setback, in this case 35 feet, to a percentage, and that percentage sets the setback at 23.1 feet from the property line, and this particular fence happens to fall within 6 feet of that. If the fence were moved back 6 feet, it would comply, et cetera, et cetera. So the case is to allow the fence to to exist as it is, as it was constructed, and not reduce it to 4 feet. And that's the request for the variance. Elevationally, Eastfield Road is approximately 10 feet above the floor elevation of the house. And it presents a number of issues for the privacy of the backyard. And that's where the hardship comes in, I believe, from the applicant, where it's a combination of privacy, security, etc. The fence in itself, though it's physically 6 feet high, is approximately, visually, about 2 feet high from Eastfield.
Because of its
physical location and elevations.
Right.
Okay. Because of those conditions, we recommend approval of the requested variance. The hardship exists. The placement of the fence, though it is within that setback, does not present an overburden that we've seen, and there's other variances that have been approved similar to this in this area and around the city. We do recommend approval of the requested variance conditionally upon a planting of three 4 to 5 foot multi-trunk crepe myrtles along the fence, just to break it up. And that's based on one negative response we had from the neighborhood about the scale of the fence to the view to the side street.
Even though from perspective, because of the elevation differences,
That's correct.
Doesn't appear to be a towering fence. That's because
correct.
of the slope of the elevation.
We were trying to meet both
right
issues of the homeowner and individuals within the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff?
And I guess the applicant was aware of that stipulation.
Pardon?
Applicants aware of that stipulation.
They wanted to remain. I'm sorry.
The applicant is aware of the condition you placed upon this variance request.
I believe so.
Yes.
Yes. We emailed the applicant regarding that.
It'll just for the sake of the record, let the record show that the applicant did acknowledge to the affirmative that he was aware of and okay with the condition applied. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here to speak for or against item 2D, I ask that you step forward at this time. Let the record show that there are none. Without any further comment, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve variance request V15-038. Allow increase in fence height from 4 feet to 6 feet. Within the front yard, 0.46 acres, land lot 416865, Bank Street, applicant Evan Wing, with a condition that the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the planting of 3 4 to 5 foot high multi-trunk crepe myrtles or acceptable substitute plantings, I assume approved by community development, placed along the fence line that faces Eastfield Road.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and second. Is there any further discussion? Without any discussion, I'll call for a vote. Motion's approved 3-0. Thank you. Last item on the agenda is item 3A, the approval of the August 12th, 2015 License Variance Board meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the August 12, 2015 License and Variance Board meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from August 12, 2015 is properly seconded. Call for a vote. Motion passes unanimously 3-0, and with that, we'll adjourn at 12:16.